Hello, everybody. Is everybody in? We're going to get into this straight away. We know that we've got a lot to talk about, and hopefully you'll have lots of questions as well. So, first of all, hello and welcome to People Insights Beyond the Survey: How to Make Post-Action Stick. As I said, we don't want to mess around. We want to get straight into it. So, firstly, some admin. I guess there's one main bit of admin. Thank you to those who've already submitted questions. If you do have any more, please use the Q&A function. We'll collate them at the end and add them into any of the existing questions. Right, to the intros. I'm Jamie Hockin, Chief Marketing Officer here at People Insight. You'll be pleased to know you'll be hearing very little from me, which is fab. Most of our time today we'll be hearing from our wonderful Kate from PI and also Zosia Hedges from InHealth. Also, during our Q&A, at the end, we're going to be bringing in Oliver Davidson and Lisa Hughes, two of our senior consultants, to help answer any questions that you have. Firstly, little intro to Zosia. Zosia leads the communications team at InHealth in fostering a culture of open and honest communication, positive engagement and well-being across the organisation. She has experience of working in the social housing sector, the NHS, and has been involved in staff surveys throughout her career, with a particular passion for staff engagement and happiness at work. So what Zosia doesn't know is not worth listening to. So it's no pressure, Zosia. She will be talking today to some of the challenges that they were looking to and did overcome, such as internal perceptions of surveys and how they've worked with PI recently. And more, most importantly, and why most of you are here today, is how they made their actions stick. Secondly, to Kate. Kate heads up our consulting team at People Insight. Kate's had over 20 years of experience in the field of employee engagement, research and consulting, supporting a wide variety of organisations to effectively measure, understand and improve the employee experience. That's what you said, Kate. That's what you told me to say. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Kate to initially give a brief overview of People Insight, and then also to go into how we work with our clients to ensure that the survey is just the start of the process. So over to you, Kate.
Lovely. Thank you, Jamie, and hi everybody. It's fantastic to have you join us today for our webinar. So very quickly, just want to give you a quick introduction to People Insight, and then share some of our sort of best practice tips for taking action before handing over to Zosia for the main event. So many of you will know People Insight. We pride ourselves on being the most actionable employee experience platform powered by people. And what really excites us at People Insight is being able to support our clients to use their survey data effectively. And our People Insight platform is really key to that. Our dashboard makes it really clear to managers what their priority for action should be. We can provide hints and tips about actions within the platform, and the tool allows you to enables you to track actions across surveys and to see which are the most effective. So it's a really, really helpful platform. And in tandem with that, we have a fantastic team who have many years of experience of working with clients on employee surveys and, importantly, using these surveys to drive improvement. And that's really what we particularly love about this area, really supporting our clients to drive change. So we're delighted that we have the opportunity to work with a whole range of clients from a variety of sectors, and we've forged long-term partnerships with many exciting organisations. These are just a few of them here. In terms of what we do, we obviously spend all of our time supporting our clients with their employee experience programmes, and a lot of our time is spent managing effective surveys, and that's really important. That is the bread and butter of what we do. But for many of our clients, this is really just the starting point. However, it is where a lot of the attention is focused. It's a really big deal sending out a survey to all staff, making sure that it lands well and gets a great response rate. But clearly, once we've got the data back, we've provided you with a dashboard, provided an executive presentation, that is where the hard work really starts for our clients. And it can be quite a difficult stage in terms of perhaps feeling overwhelmed by the amount of information or a lack of clarity as to what to do. So this can be a bit of a pain point, and that's really what we're focusing on today. Within most of our surveys, we actually ask a question. I believe that this survey will lead to action. Across the UK, the average score for that question is 51%. So that you can see that within many organisations, there are a lot of people that really aren't sure whether the survey is going to have a positive impact. And we love working with clients to ensure that it absolutely does. So before I hand over to Zosia, I just want to share 4 fundamentals for effective action that we talk about a lot at People Insight. So pretty straightforward. The first of these is commitment. So making sure that at the outset of any programme, there is a real commitment, not only to running a survey, but to taking action, and that this commitment comes right from the top of the organisation. There also needs to be clarity, really very much a clear message of what is going to happen, who is going to take responsibility, and when will that happen. There needs to be collaboration. So it shouldn't just be about managers taking action. This is an opportunity to really get the voice of all employees. And actions need to be communicated. We obviously need to start with communicating survey results, but then we need to make sure that we're also communicating the progress of actions. So just a little bit more detail in terms of commitment. It's good practice, and most of our clients do this at the beginning of the survey, have a welcome message from the chief exec, which not only talks about the logistics of the survey, but really makes it clear what managers are committing to afterwards. So the fact that there will be action as a result of the survey. So that's vital, and that does tend to happen. But it's also important that all managers across the organisation feel comfortable with this. And sometimes there is a bit of a training need. For some managers, this might be a new activity. So at People Insight, we provide that level of support in terms of really upskilling managers, making sure they're clear about expectations and feel confident to use the survey results effectively. In terms of clarity, I think a clear process is absolutely fundamental. At People Insight, we have this 6 stages to action. So really making sure that people are spending time initially understanding the results, sharing the results as quickly as possible, and then making sure that we're prioritising where to focus action. So there can be a temptation to take action in a lot of different areas. It's far better to focus in on a couple only, to plan smart actions, and then to make sure that they actually take place. So organisations use this sort of very clear process to really map out exactly what is going to happen and when, just to make it real for them. And I mentioned that collaboration is important. We've obviously got this valuable feedback from staff across the organisation, but once we have that information, it's then important that we play it back to staff in meetings to get additional insights from them and really involve our teams in identifying the priority and identifying the actions that need to happen. And then finally, making sure that we're continuing to communicate these key messages. So obviously, once the survey's been complete, we need to communicate the key results, but as quickly as possible, we also need to communicate those action areas and really be clear about what we're going to do and continue to update people on the progress of that. So that's just a quick introduction from People Insight in terms of these 4 fundamentals of communication, collaboration, clarity, and commitment. But I'm now delighted to hand over to Zosia, who's going to talk us through how she's really made this happen so effectively at InHealth.
Thank you, Kate. I'm just taking control of the slides, if that's okay. So thanks very much for inviting me to talk today. It's a topic that I'm really passionate about, and in my role takes up quite happily, basically all of my time. And as Jamie introduced me as earlier, so I'm the head of brand and communications at InHealth, been here for 5 years, and I've had the pleasure of working with People Insight during that time on each of our surveys. And today I'm going to run through our approach to turning staff survey data into action and share with you how we believe that we can use that rich information to take really meaningful actions that genuinely drives forward engagement, and importantly for us, shows colleagues that their feedback is acted upon. So first up, who we are. So InHealth is the UK's largest independent specialist diagnostics provider. We work in partnership with the NHS and have done for about 30 years. We provide a whole range of different services, largely diagnostics, but lots more than that. So we do MRI, CT, endoscopy, audiology. There's a few listed on the screen there. And we see more than 4 million patients a year, and it's growing all the time. We're based across around 850 locations across the country. They are locations in hospitals where we've got our own MRI units, for example, in their mobiles. We've got more than 100 mobile units seen in that middle picture there. Community settings, so GP surgeries, community health settings, and standalone centres, so where we build dedicated diagnostic centres. And across all of that activity, we've got around 3,500 staff, and that includes about 450 managers. And we're growing, which is mad. When I first started, we were about 2 million patients, and that was only 5 years ago. So just a reflection of how our services are really in demand. We're really proud of our purpose and our mission to make healthcare better. And at the heart of that is a team of people. So yes, we're a service provider, and we know that we've got the equipment and the technology and the environment that's really high quality. But our success is absolutely rooted in the people who deliver those services. And that's the reason alone that we put so much emphasis on how our people feel, this staff survey, and how engaged our teams are. Which leads me into why we have a staff survey. I know it's commonplace for lots of businesses to do a survey, and I don't believe that everybody knows why they do one. Lots of people just inherit, let's do a survey, and you go, okay. But I think knowing why you do it is really important. Some people think it's just a mandatory exercise. Sometimes it's just the way things always have been done. But the purpose of our survey is really clear, and it genuinely, we wouldn't be here without it. If our people aren't happy, then our business isn't happy. I know that sounds super cheesy, but for us, it's really true, and it's simple like that. People are our biggest success factor, and they're also our single biggest cost. Our growth is rapid. Our growth is rapid, and it's continued. So we have to have a firm grip on how people are feeling as the business grows. Otherwise, we're not able to support them. And from a recruitment perspective, retention of staff is vital. Yes, the cost of attrition can be high, but actually having loyal staff who support culture and positivity is hugely important. So for us, they're the kind of key reasons why we do a survey. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our survey and how we've been doing over time. So we're at 79% staff engagement, which is cracking. We're really proud of it. It's also our 5th year-on-year increase. We've got this year we had a 67% overall response rate. That's a mix of permanent staff and bank staff. Historically we didn't actually ever survey our bank staff, but we made a change last year, and it's been really worthwhile because regardless of how often they work for us, it's really insightful to know how they're feeling. So you can see there in the graph, we've gone from 70% in 2019 up to 79% where we stand today. Now, bearing in mind two of those years were through COVID, when healthcare was at its most sensitive, stressed, in demand. We're incredibly proud of those results. We are a leader in our market. We compare very favourably to the NHS and also to the healthcare benchmark that the People Insight dashboard provides for us. And don't ask me to quantify this, but I believe that 79% staff engagement is also not just sector leading, but for UK businesses as a whole. It's massive. I was really hoping for 80% this year. We didn't quite do it, but next year is another year. Our response rate's also been quite high. It dipped a little this year, which I put down to the growth of the organisation, but also capacity. People are so busy and stretched that it's a lot to do, and I appreciate that. But we've still got a really good response rate. And you can see here some of the highlights. So really high 90s up there about recommending InHealth as a service, as an employer, knowing what's expected of them at work, welcoming new team members. And across all of the questions that we ask, which is 50, 22 of them all saw increases this year from last year. The rest were either the same, or we had 2, I think, that went back a percentage. So we're really proud of those results. It's shown you loads of the stuff on here already, but so I've given you some context about who we are, why we survey, and some survey highlights. But now on to the bit that I think you're all here for, which is what do we do with all of that lovely information? And from my perspective, it's lots. In my role, I can genuinely say that the staff survey is what I spend most of my time on over the course of the year. But actually, it's not just me. It then never comes down to just one person. It's our whole organisation, and that is key to how we make our actions stick. And I'm going to talk you through some of the things that we do here. So apologies, because you can probably see half of what's on the slide, but I'm going to just give you a bit of info about them. So I spend hours and days interrogating the dashboard. It's like a rabbit hole, and it's so insightful. And I read every single comment, and I theme all of the comments. And actually, we give our managers access to that dashboard, and they do the same. I always encourage them to wipe out effectively a whole day, at least half a day, to have a look at that. because without looking at the data, how can you know what to do with it? I do a detailed executive summary. So the day that the survey results come out, Ryan will tell you that I'm chomping at the bit to get all the data, and I put together a very detailed summary for the exec team. It goes to the exec team meetings that happen every month. They talk about it, they ask me questions, and they get really involved. We also have a staff partnership forum, which is a group of staff that are effectively like a consultative group, and they look at all the data, they look at the same information, because their role is to support staff and their teams to know what's going on and to help us make decisions about people. So they get really involved in that. We also give all of our people managers unrestricted access to the dashboard. We hadn't always done that because we felt that people only needed to see what's happening in their area. But with so many internal moves and the business growing, actually, it's quite helpful to see what else is happening. And for me, it really speaks to our culture to say we're not hiding anything. It actually also breeds a bit of healthy competition, which helps with people developing their action plans later down the line and sharing best practice. So for us, that's been a real win this year, the last 2 years, sorry. And we do a dedicated training session for them on the dashboard so they can understand it. I put together an action planning toolkit, which I'll share with you in a bit, but I give people really good guidance around what they should be doing, how they should be looking at the data. We have a engagement red, amber, green approach. So if your engagement's less than 60, we need an action plan from you almost immediately. What are you going to do to improve those scores? We have bi-yearly people business review meetings, basically where our senior leaders present to the executive team about what's going on with their people. They do workforce planning and all kinds of things. But in the last 2 years, there's a whole dedicated section on staff survey results, because the executive are expecting to hear, well, what are you doing about your staff engagement? We do loads of all staff communication. Obviously, in my role, that's key anyway, but we talk about it all the time, weekly, monthly, as often as we can connect anything that we're doing with staff survey feedback we're doing. We've got a dedicated equality, diversity and inclusion forum, and we do a whole detailed analysis on that as well. So we don't just have we don't just review the data for staff generally, we look at it from an ED&I data perspective, and we've got a dedicated champion that looks after that. I have fortnightly review meetings with our Chief People Officer and our Head of Pay and Reward to constantly make sure that anything that's coming up we're exploring and we're looking at. We do external announcements, and we have associated recruitment campaigns. So we say, you know, if we're advertising a job, we make a connection to how people feel in that area of the business using the staff survey data. We share loads of information in our new starter induction and just generally with staff all the time, basically. And it is a year-long communication campaign to report on progress. So last month I told you we were looking at this, and this is how we've gone ahead with that action. So it's a lot. We really do put loads of effort into this, and I think is partly the reason why we've been so successful in our engagement, because it really means something to us. And then when it comes to action planning, we've carried out all of those previous actions. We then go on to create one InHealth group action wheel. So we do encourage all of our managers that have got access go away and they make their own wheels, if you like. But I do one for the whole organisation, which themes all the feedback, and it allows staff to drill down into each section. So you can see here for last year, this is basically it's a PDF, and you can click on each of these themes, and when you click on one, it brings up a whole load of information that staff can look at. It's interactive. It's not just a boring static document. So if somebody's particularly interested in pay and salary, for example, they can go in and have a look. And the way that we structure it is that so we're in the training progression action here. So I basically, and this is how all the managers then go on to create their action wheels, they will take some verbatim comments to give a flavour of why we've landed at that theme. So it'll literally pick out exactly what someone said in the comments, which is powerful enough anyway, because somebody that wrote that will see that and think, wow, yeah, they're actually doing something with it. So we have a what you said bit here. Then we have a already in place, which is a key bit for me. I think lots of times with surveys, people we'll get the staff survey results and everyone flaps and thinks, oh God, we've got loads to do. But often there's already stuff that you're doing. Potentially people just don't know what it is. So we use that bit to reinforce stuff that we've got in place already. So we're not scrabbling around trying to come up with new actions. So an example of that would be, I don't know, somebody would have a comment to say, we really need a way of congratulating each other every day. We don't have anything like that. Now, we've got a social recognition wall on our rewards platform, and you can literally go on there any time of day and post like on a Facebook, it looks like a Facebook post, and say, thanks for being a great team member today. And so that came up as a theme a couple of years ago, reward and recognition, and people not feeling like they've been thanked. So what the comms then for us and my team is to absolutely help staff to recognise or remember that that stuff's there. So it's not always about actually creating new actions. It's often just about improving communication about what you've got in place. We've had people say, why don't we have a long service recognition scheme? We've spent £100,000 plus in the last year on those long service vouchers. So I can drill down into the data and go, where's that coming from? Clearly, we need to do some more comms in that area. So that's effectively what we will try and capture here. And then we have a future plans to explore section. So based on what people are saying, there are some clear things that stick out. So if there's a theme around, for example, work-life balance and flexibility, but you don't have a flexible working policy, you can genuinely look at that. And that's something that you can be, honest with people about, saying, we'll look at it, we'll explore it. But I think managing people's expectations is important here. We say on the front page of our wheel, stuff that we say we're exploring has to be costed. We have to do an impact analysis. We have to, has to stick, basically. But if it doesn't, we're really honest with people about that and say that's not going to work. So an example of that might be, I get it all the time, can we have an all-staff conference where everyone gets together? Well, no, we can't get 3,500 clinical staff together and stop services for a day. But if I can tell people that, they'll stop asking for it, and it manages their expectations. It gives them some context and people move on. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour about how we action plan. And here's an idea of the stuff that we've done off the back of that. So this is just a small selection, but I mentioned long service recognition awards here. We've given out 800 plus long service recognition awards. The impact of that has been phenomenal. People are so pleased that they've been recognised. We've introduced, we did some enhanced annual leave in that time as well. So you don't just get a monetary voucher if you hit 20 years, you get an extra 3 days off. We've enhanced mileage payments. We've done a cost of living payment. We've explored dental insurance options, which we never had before. We reviewed our private medical insurance provider. We've introduced volunteering days. We've done loads, and all of this stuff is what we then go on to share with staff in the communications to say, look at all this stuff you told us that you wanted us to look at, and look at what we've actually been able to do. I just have a sip of my tea because my mouth's gone dry. And I'm going to be honest and say that actually not all of the stuff that we do here is something that's been that's come from the survey. But what I have done is linked the introduction of stuff that we've done where it's appropriate to staff feedback. It's not I don't believe it's a disingenuous way of doing it, but as an organisation, and if you didn't do a staff survey, you'd still be doing an element of staff engagement anyway and looking at that, hopefully. But if there's stuff that is coming up, and I'll give you an example of season ticket loans, for example. A few people said to us in London area, it would be really good if we could maybe do some sort of company supported or company paid for, or some salary sacrifice around season ticket loans. So we did look at it. No one actually said it specifically in the staff survey, but we've shared and communicated that to say we've had some feedback about this. And linking those things back to actions can also really help. It doesn't have to always come from the survey. And one other thing that also sticks out for me when I look at surveys is, again, people often try and take the big actions first because they think that's going to have the biggest impact. Pay is always going to come up. People will forever say, I want to get paid more. And often, we will try and do stuff like that in the year, but it's not the single biggest thing we can make an investment in because it's so massive. But this year a comment came up in the survey about water coolers. There was a team in one specific area going, the water cooler is disgusting. I think we should get a water machine. Well, if you can spend a couple of £100 on a water cooler and link it back to the survey, and it's a change that can be made the next day, the impact that will have, I believe, is massive, because they go, oh God, actually we said something, they've done something immediate, and it's a relatively low cost, but actually has had a big impact. So one of my bits of advice around action planning is to try and look at the practical stuff and don't overpromise on things that you think will have a massive impact just because they feel massive. Actually, the smaller stuff often is where you should start. This is just an example of the guidance I reference. So in my toolkit, I do keep your points short and easy to read. This is your theme. So you can see here, long service recognition. I've taken some verbatim comments, said what we've already got in place, and we've got some future plans to explore. So saying that Enjoy is our reward and recognition system. So we'll look at Enjoy vouchers. We did end up doing that, and we enhanced the leave, and it was fab, and people are really loving it. So I've spoken a bit about how we practically action plan, and I thought it'd be just worth mentioning a key few things that have come out of the survey in the last year. So we've got really high scores generally. And so for InHealth, it's actually about building on positives rather than trying to move away from any negatives. But as I said before, our leadership when it comes to making action stick is so important. And actually this year, leadership, you can see here, was one of the areas where we went back a step. Well, actually, I think that's a 79%, but it went down by 1% from last year. But clearly that's important for us. Clearly it's an area that's gone backwards, so we want to have a look at that. And we've done loads of work in leadership in the last 12 months, so we need to have a look at it again. Recognition is also an area that we work on all the time. And pay has come up a lot in reward and recognition this year, which I think is probably a reflection of the current cost of living crisis, but it's something that we need to look at and keep working on, because clearly it's a motivator for people, and recognition for people is just a huge thing. So there were just a few of the challenges that I thought I'd share with you. And one other thing to say on the scorecard and generally the survey results that you get, I think lots of people, I think it's really easy and tempting to go straight to the scorecard and look at all your individual questions, but I can't emphasize enough how the key drivers actually should be what you look at in real detail. They're obviously different for each team, and I look at it from an InHealth group perspective, but this is because this is telling you these are the things that will most impact your engagement. Yes, you might see a red area and go, oh my God, that question was 80% last year and it's gone back to 60. But if it's not featuring in your key drivers of engagement, we're not saying don't look at it, but we don't focus on that as the priority. I tend to start with the key drivers of engagement from an action planning perspective, which happily this has kind of come up for us in terms of equality, diversity and inclusion. So, respecting individual differences, feeling valued, taking positive action on health and well-being. And they're all things that are massively high on our agenda. So it's really nice to be able to reflect the actions and the stuff we've got coming up to the staff survey. So to finish off, I'm just going to run through 5 key learnings and reflections. First being invest the time. I know it feels like a lot to get through and add to your workload, but I promise it's worth it. And there should be at least one person or a team dedicating to moving this all forward. Otherwise, I don't think it's successful. Yes, it sits under my remit, but having the executive team and the senior leadership team supportive of it and me putting loads of emphasis on it has really helped. The second one was don't necessarily focus on the big stuff. I mentioned it before, but look at the little wins. Little actions can make a huge difference to people. The third one, being involved all levels of the organisation. It is imperative that everyone from exec level down sees the value in the survey. I talk about it all the time. My manager, Amelia, who's our chief people officer, talks about it all the time. Our chief exec asks me about it all the time. He's really keen to see how we're tracking against other organisations. So you've got to involve everyone and everyone's got to be on board. Fourth one is to amend the questions to reflect the current time. So People Insight, Ryan particularly, has always been really supportive of this, but there's always kind of a set of questions that are topical. And we obviously like to look at the same questions every year because it's helpful to have a benchmark and see how you're tracking. But actually adding new questions, we had one in about financial well-being this year to see if the stuff we were sharing with people about, money matters, and given what's been going on in the world. And it's been a really good benchmark for us to look at that data in the comments and go, okay, well, there's a group of people that don't need it, which is great. But actually for those that do, what else can we do? So yeah, being topical, I think, is good. And the last one being communicating all the time, overshare, link the survey to it as much as you can, get your CEO to mention it, get your managers to talk about it at conferences, talk about it at recruitment. I think it's really important. And staff want to, prospective staff want to join somewhere where people are happy. And if you can demonstrate that you're listening to people and understanding if they are or not, and then doing something about it, I think it's really important. And that's it from me. I was gonna, I had a Q&A, but I think I'll hand over back to Kate so that they can facilitate that part of the webinar.
I will take over there, actually, Zosia. Zosia, thanks so much. I know this wasn't a recruitment ad for InHealth, but it does feel like an amazing place to work. So, you guys have done quite clearly a brilliant job. We've got quite a few questions that we had in that came in before, which is fab. So we're going to jump into them. Sorry, Zosia, I'm going to go straight back to you, actually.
Okay.
Just regarding one of the questions that came in live was actually how many people are within your people team is sort of part one of the question. And you've talked about increasing senior management sort of engagement. And I guess, are there any, it sounds like your senior management are very engaged anyway. Have you had any challenges? And if you have any challenges on that, what have been some of your tips about getting some of those senior managers engaged?
The team, the first part of your question, so head of comms is my role. I've got a comms exec person that reports into me. That's the size of the comms team. But people services, there's probably about between 50 or 60. That does include an international recruitment team. So a big team. But the staff survey, sorry, falls to my team, although we kind of share the workload across pay and reward manager that I mentioned. So we're a small team, kind of really trying to push forward a massive project, but it tends to work. Genuinely, the single biggest way that we have found that we get senior managers on board is making a connection between retention and the engagement figures. So we've done, our chief people officer is really passionate about this, and it 9 times out of 10, if you look at an area that's got red engagement, 60% or less, and then you look at their attrition figures, they are really high. And there's a story there. Something's going wrong because your staff are leaving. You've got really bad engagement. So what's happening? And when I mentioned those people business reviews before, where senior leaders have to go and present to the executive what's going on, they literally have to sit in front of the CEO and say, "This is the workforce plan. Here's what my retention figures are like." And the team go, "They're really high. Can you show us your staff engagement scores?" And they go, "Yeah, they're really low." And they're held accountable for that. And that has been, and so in the last 2 years, managers have really sat up and gone, I hadn't quite appreciated the link between staff engagement, motivation, and my team leaving, because they almost didn't want to see it. And that's been a massive shift for us. So I would say that is one of the biggest things. Also having, hopefully it comes, I'm so passionate about the survey and being happy at work, that making sure that the people that are talking about the survey feel the same is important as well. Which I know you can't force upon someone, and I know you can't just make someone passionate about something, but that for me goes back to, if you're in the right place and you want to work somewhere that you enjoy, then everything you're working on should be something that you can positively talk about and bring people along a journey. So that's how I'd answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's the culture, obviously, you fostered that allows people to be excited without it feeling forced, which is so important.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zosia. Obviously, we've just got Lisa and Oliver here as well, part of our senior consultants here at People Insight. I've got a question for you, Oliver, that's come in. Regarding timescales for delivery, how do you decide, or how do you work with our clients to decide the frequency of surveys and how we can measure the differences in other ways rather than just on the surveys themselves?
Yeah, hi, Jamie. Really good question, and one we could probably spend a whole webinar talking about, but
you've got a couple of minutes, Oliver. Okay.
Indeed. So it's going to vary, of course. There's no one size fits all with this, and it's about how rapidly your organization can really make change, and that's going to be a function of all sorts of things around the size of the organization, the level of maturity, the business sector you're in, all those sorts of things. So clearly bigger, slower moving, more traditional organizations will take longer to drive change, and you want to get that sweet spot, of course, of measuring change that is genuinely happening and not doing surveys. For example, surveys are great tools, but not doing surveys too frequently that you are measuring before change is really embedded and taken root. And don't tell some of my colleagues, but I do spend some of my time talking people out of doing surveys, because sometimes people see that they're a great initiative, a great tool, and want to do them more often than they're actually able to make an impact. The other factor I just mentioned there is, of course, the nature of the change you're trying to drive. So if you're looking for steady, good, positive, incremental progress, that's going to take longer than if you're looking at a change that is sort of rapid, transformational change. And so you've got to get that pitch right. The other piece, and this is where the two parts of the question I think link in, is surveys are not the only tool for listening to people in organizations and monitoring progress and change. So we'd certainly encourage people to be looking at things like, well, Zosia, you mentioned that sort of people business reviews. I think you're probably, as part of that, you're probably looking at the actions that people have put in place. And if those actions are well formulated, they've got milestones, they've got objective ways of looking, have they been delivered? I think those sort of objective measures and indications are really important. So putting in place a sort of active review of decisions that you've made, and if those things genuinely are being implemented, is going to be key. So putting that process in place too.
Wonderful segue. It's like we planned it. I've got a question for Lisa regarding those actions that you were just talking about, Oliver. Lisa, one of the questions is how to take actions beyond a "you said we did" approach to facilitate that actual tangible, meaningful change. Thoughts?
Big question, but I think we've actually answered it a bit through Zosia today as well. I think it's all about strategizing a bit about what you want the survey to achieve. What's the outcome? Where's the goal? What are you going to be measuring in that journey? I think that's really important from the start, really. And you don't always know it from the start. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but you can certainly start to pick that up. I think goal setting, we know through some really good research that when you have a response rate and an engagement rate in the upper quartile, you should start to see correlation with client services, customer services, student experience, for instance. So, you know, it's really important to look beyond that one survey, looking at 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, and linking it to your strategy. Then using the dashboard, giving autonomy, as mentioned earlier, you know, really opening up the dashboard to as many people as possible who manage a team or who look after a department, really starts to build a very different culture straight away, or community, where people are able to access insights and data very quickly and easily. Then are able to log their actions, and then over time measure those actions. So we know after 3 years is a really good data point to start to look at correlation between action and engagement score, factor score, and question score, because you really have a lot more data and insights to look at. Also connecting it to other organizational data, as mentioned, whether that's retention, whether that's sickness and absence, whether that's reward, recognition, feedback, actually looking at some of your HR hygiene factors and looking at those and connecting that data. At a local level, I think what makes it really important is sustaining and pivoting, so keeping that communication going. So an eye on the future, but also at a local tactical level, what are those small or slightly larger things that are having a really big impact? If they're not having an impact, being able to measure that quickly with a quick pulse or a quick focus group or a quick, you know, mentee or a quick check-in can help you pivot. And I think that's where you get the real agility. So I think there's loads being shared today, but I do definitely think if you have a strategy about what you're trying to achieve, you can start to connect all of those dots.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lisa. I think, you know, what we've been talking about throughout, and, you know, the title of this is all about actions, and certainly, Zosia, you've been talking about how you have been driving the actions. But actually, a question for Kate. One of the questions that came in is how to keep the momentum going, and who should own the actions. And I know it's not necessarily a one size fits all, but how we then, who owns them, and how to clearly communicate the actions that have come from, you know, the surveys.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. And yeah, I think that is something that is so important. You know, when we see action planning activity, there's clearly a lot of momentum right at the beginning in terms of understanding the results, identifying the areas for action. But it is very important that there's a clear owner. And one thing I'd say is that it does not need to be the manager. It shouldn't be one person owning all of the actions. So firstly, limit the number of areas you're focusing action on. But I would resist the manager taking them all as their particular actions. It's really good to empower staff to own some of those actions as well. So I would spread responsibility across the organisation, as long as that person has the time and the authority to make that change. And then I think, you know, one thing that can be a weakness is that we design really good actions, but that staff forget the messages that they initially heard and make an assumption that nothing's changed or nothing's happening as a result of the survey. So that continued communication is absolutely critical. So at an organisational level, you know, at town hall meetings, at board meetings, to really hone in on what have we done, what have we achieved, what do we need to do differently, but also at a team level, make sure it's a standing item on those team meeting agendas so that we're continuing to provide communication as to all of the great things we're doing, but also to have a review of what's not working quite as we'd want to, where do we need to maybe pivot and do something a little bit differently, but just making sure that we are communicating the progress that's happening and being really honest and transparent with staff.
Fab, thanks, Kate. Actually, about 15% of the questions that came in were very similar to this one. It's actually directed to you, Zosia, but I think you've done such a great job of answering so far in terms of how to ensure feedback is translated into actions that become embedded in culture. And I think a lot of your presentation was about that. So I don't think we necessarily need to go into that in detail, but one of the question was related to that was how to involve employees to make the change, them sort of change agents themselves, not just senior leadership, but actually your colleagues on, you know, at the level and below. How are there any sort of tips that you would give to sort of help that side of things?
Yeah, I mentioned the Staff Partnership Forum earlier, and they have been really key at being able to sort of, well, if they understand the data a bit more in a bit more level of detail than all other staff do, they're effectively champions for saying, right, you know, we've been asked to do the survey. This is what the feedback is. How can we work together to make it to make the actions happen? So we've put quite a lot of emphasis on them being sort of change champions, if you like, but also the fact that we talk about it. We invite staff all the time to, you know, if there's something you think of that you think we could be exploring that's not mentioned in the survey, or you've got a particular interest in, come and talk to us. We had, so sustainability came up quite a lot last year in the survey, and about our organisation becoming more sustainable, which we're absolutely working on, but we hadn't really started communicating on too much because we were sort of on the start of our journey. And we put a call out in our weekly comms to say, you know, if you're passionate, and we've got like 50 something people that responded and went, yeah, me. And so, you know, not everyone's going to be interested in everything, but if you can, there's always enough to kind of work on. So we've tried to make it quite accessible for staff to say, you know, this, like you guys have been saying, the staff survey doesn't fall to your manager. Don't look to them to make the changes. You said the staff, what can we do with it? We also encourage managers to, once they've interpreted their own data and they've started working on their action wheels, we say to them, you know, have team meetings, get everyone to reflect on what has been captured to the team. And it is hard because obviously the survey is anonymous and staff have been really honest. But I think it really demonstrates we really want to do something with this. So if our team have, you know, if they've largely been saying that this is an issue, how can we work together? And then they can bring to life a bit more of those actions. I noticed one of the Q&As in the chat was around how we support managers to deliver the actions and do the wheels. So there is a toolkit which helps managers to actually make those the action wheels themselves locally, which we ask for. And so every red area has to produce one, and every amber area does as well. But we don't expect those to be done in isolation. So often the managers will go, right, staff, this is what I'm thinking. So it is collaborative, and we obviously encourage that. We talk about that in the comms as well.
Fabulous. That actually answered the next question that I was going to ask. So that's incredibly efficient. Thank you very much. I'm very aware of time, and we wanted to make sure that we stuck to time today. So I think we've probably got lots more questions that we might actually answer as we follow up as well. So, but first of all, thank you to Zosia. Thank you to Kate, Oliver, and Lisa as well for helping out. We will be following up with this, which lots of people have asked, in terms of the presentation and the recording. And we're also going to be getting in touch with you to have a little bit of a free audit from People Insight in terms of how you go about your listening strategy as well, if anyone's interested. Hopefully you all will be after you've heard everything today. So thank you very much. We look forward to hearing from all of you soon. And Zosia, thanks very much again.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.